Welcome. You're listening to Sports Econ 101, the show where we discuss sports topics from a business perspective. I'm your host, Edward Brown, along with my co-hosts, FP Santangelo Jr. and Russell Jackman. Not sure where Vern is today, and our special guest should be on in the next segment, we're hoping. At each commercial break, we're going to ask a sports trivia question. Today is pitchers from the year 2000 to 2009. I know Russ would appreciate that. We're not going back to the 1800s.
Although I was hoping that you'd work in some basketball trivia somewhere down the line, but I guess
we'll do it again. You know, definitely. I mean, you're getting into baseball season. You know, we had a bunch of
we went all through basketball season. You didn't ask any basketball trivia, so hopefully maybe when
we'll definitely go
playoffs come around, you'll beat them too.
Okay, I got a quick question for you guys. I don't know if we're going to cover this again, but I'm waiting for the first transgender man to play in women's basketball. What do you think?
Well, I'm glad that you've got something that inspires you.
Well, not necessarily inspiration, but I'm just thinking, you know, they already have the swimming thing. Well, why not?
I was thinking, what about like a men's and women's basketball league first before we do transgender and see if that could ever work out? Yeah, I'd always thought about sports where both men and women both could play on an equal playing level.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it's hard because biology gets in the way.
Yeah.
Obviously, men are naturally stronger because of testosterone in their body. But I think there's some skill sports, you know, that could eventually work. And the one that I'm always familiar with is baseball. Like, what if there was a nasty knuckleball pitcher? And we've seen that before in the minor leagues. So I'd love to see a woman play Major League Baseball one day. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, one of the problems with having women involved in a men's basketball game is that the women's basketball is smaller and lighter than the men's basketball. So
that's true.
Yeah, they'd have to figure out.
Do you play
there's a lot of co-ed leagues
for guys?
There's co-ed leagues in college, so that maybe something like that would be really cool to see eventually.
All right. Well, stay with us. You're listening to Sports Econ 101. Don't touch that dial. We're going to be right back. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Edward Brown here, along with FP Santangelo Jr. and Russell Jackman. I know our guest is trying to get on the computer here, and it looks like he's starting to get there. But until he does, let's go ahead and talk about some stuff. So.
He'll be a relief pitcher. He'll be in relief.
He'll be in relief, exactly. So on Monday night, you had the NCAA championship. Pretty exciting.
What a game.
What a game, huh?
What an amazing game it was, except I was pulling for North Carolina, and my heart is absolutely broken today.
Well, especially with the
job.
A 15-point, or was it 15 or 16? 16-point deficit. Yeah.
That was the biggest halftime deficit to ever be overcome in an NCAA tournament game.
Yeah.
Final.
And then did you see, I saw this morning, Baycott's ankle injury, and the question comes up, did it have to do with a loose floorboard? And if you look at the highlights, his ankle, his foot seems to go right out underneath him, right as he hits a certain floorboard that kind of buckles.
So I've always thought about this, guys. You put a basketball court. Hold on, I think that's our guest.
Can you hear me?
Steve, are you on? Well, he's still trying. We'll hear him soon. Go ahead, Epi.
Well, I was just saying, when you put in like a brand new basketball,
cannot hear me,
right?
Yeah, Steve, we can hear you. Go ahead. FP is just telling us about putting a basketball court on something. Go ahead.
Yeah, so when you put the basketball court in the Superdome and you put them in a football field and you try to convert these stadiums, right, you might have some issues. So that's very interesting development. But guys, this March Madness tournament, my goodness, it delivered in every single way possible. Yeah. You had the small school coming out of nowhere and beat the Goliath schools. You had Coach K going down against North Carolina. You had the Blue Bloods in the Final Four, and then you had Kansas coming back to win. My goodness, what a tournament.
Yeah,
I agree.
That's definitely good for basketball. It's funny about the floorboard thing too, because Brady, what's Brady's last name? It's like Masick or something. I can't remember off the top of my head, but the guy with the big red beard, his same sort of thing. It looked like a floorboard kind of went out from underneath him. Kind of reminds me of Madison Square Garden. Remember in the Celtics, they used to have that kind of stuff used to happen all the time. Where they called it the home.
Yes, the parquet.
The parquet. That's right. There it is. All right. And Steve, it looks like your phone is going upside down and then back again. Can you hear us okay?
I can barely hear you. Can you not see me?
I can see your computer, but that's okay. As long as we can hear you, that'll work. So let's introduce our special guest. Just maybe put your microphone up a little bit closer to your mouth. Our special guest is Steve Travers, author and former pitcher. Now, Steve, you made it to what, rookie ball?
Yeah, rookie ball, A ball.
A ball, okay.
With the exception of one major league spring training exhibition game.
Okay. And the thing is, you're quite the author. So you kind of moved in that direction some years back, and you've written all kinds of books. And what's this latest one you have?
Well, this latest book is called Best Sports Writing Ever. And it's the first book I've ever written that is only on Kindle. It is, it's not a hardcover bound book, at least not yet. I don't know if it's going to be. It's available at Amazon, also Barnes and Noble, Smashwords, a few other places. You can actually read the first 80 pages free on probably at Amazon and maybe Google Books, but I think it's $7 or $9 if you want to purchase it for a Kindle, available essentially at Amazon.
Yeah, okay. We want to tease us a little bit about like what kind of sports stories?
Well, it is, like you, Edward, I'm a huge sports fan and grew up rooting for teams and being a sports fan and reading about sports. I think in many ways, our era, the 60s, 70s, was the golden age of the written word in sports. And so what I've done is I've compiled essentially my 100 favorite sports articles and books. It's about 100 different books and articles that have been written, really beginning with the turn of the century and going all the way up to the present day. And I have, the first section is articles, the second section is books. And I've reviewed all of these articles and books. I've given some personal aspects of these articles and books, how they affected me when I read them, a little bit about the writers of these pieces, and then I review them. Like you do a book review or an article review, and talk about what a great piece of work it was, and how it stands up over time. And so that's really what it is. I think in today's age where people really aren't reading, and they're not, and that kind of great writing seems to be dead. It seems the smarter we are, the more information we have, the less knowledge we actually seem to convey.
We have to work as hard.
So I don't see very few great sports books or great sports writers exist anymore. So most of this stuff is, the likes of Pat Jordan, Hunter S. Thompson, Bill Spaceman Lee, people like that, the stuff that they've written or what has been written about them back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, which really had a big effect on me and formed the kind of writing that I do.
Why don't you give us your top 5 that you liked?
Well, I think Pat Jordan is a guy who played a big role in my life. Pat Jordan and and he's a friend of mine, and we have a lot in common because he was a professional baseball player and I was a professional baseball player, and he became a writer and I became a writer. And there really are not a lot of people who did that. There aren't a lot of people who played a professional sport and then later were professional journalists covering that sport or other sports. Jordan, his story is very interesting. And he was one of the greatest amateur schoolboy baseball players who ever lived, arguably the greatest little league baseball player who ever came across the pike, an incredible high school baseball player. He threw close to 100 miles an hour. and was scouted and wooed by every team in baseball coming out of high school. This is before the draft. So you players had their choice of the teams that they're going to sign with. Anyway, he signed with the Milwaukee Braves, went into the Braves organization and completely flopped. Had no success. As great as he thought he was, or people projected him to be, none of that came to pass. And so then he went back to his hometown and thought about it. Why did I fail? And as therapy, more or less, he began to write about his minor league career. And he had a book called A False Spring, which was about his minor league days, which was very, very influential for me. Then he started writing for Sports Illustrated, and he put together a series of articles about pitchers. And these articles in SI ranged from the depiction of great pitchers, such as Tom Seaver, to failed pitchers who he had a lot in common with, like, for instance, Bo Belinsky, or pitchers who had quirks, like Sam McDowell, who, for all of his talent, had alcohol problems.
Stay with us a minute. We have to cut to a break because I want to continue on with that. All right, so here's our first trivia question. This left-handed pitcher led the major leagues in victories, 148, from the year 2000 to 2009. Can you name him? And Steve, if you know the answer, don't say anything. We'll let you answer when you get back. All right, that's our trivia question. Stay with us. Sports Econ 101. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Edward Brown here, along with FP Santangelo Jr., Russell Jackman, and our special guest, Steve Travers. Our first trivia question. This left-handed pitcher led the major leagues in victories with 148 from 2000 to 2009. Can you name him?
CC Sabathia?
No? It's not a bad guess, actually.
That was my guess.
Yeah. Nope. Andy Pettit.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Andy Pettit.
That's right.
He
So,
taught me how to throw a circle changeup once.
yeah.
Funny enough, my dad was in a Yankees camp, and he took me to the backfields, and he taught me how to throw a circle changeup. And I went into Little League that year trying to throw it, and I couldn't throw it. So that's when I knew I wasn't going to be a pitcher. When Andy Pettit's teaching you how to pitch, and you're just not good. So,
Well,
Is this
yeah, your
FP
hand's a lot
Santangelo?
smaller.
Junior, I'm his son.
Are you the one who played professional ball for the A's
No.
and the Giants? Huh?
No, that's my dad. My dad
Oh.
did.
Yeah.
Okay. Your dad played for the 2001 A's. Is that correct?
He did. He played for that Moneyball team.
Well, I once got invited to, I'll make this short. I got invited to to go out with all those guys by
boy.
Barry Zito. And let's just put it this way. I've never seen any professional ball players have more beautiful women around them or have a better time. Let's just leave it at that. That team knew
Well,
how to
we
have a good time.
We can expand on it a little bit. That 2001 A's team is
Oh, my
historically known to be the hardest partying team in baseball history. And I'm talking about even harder partiers than the 1988 Mets and 89 Mets.
That's
Those
saying
guys-
something. And from what I've seen, I would agree. Tim Hudson, I went to Hudson like a few days later. I said, hey, man, this is supposed to be spring training. You're supposed to be getting ready. But
Yeah.
you guys sure are partying hard. And his comment was, yeah, we better get out of town while we're still standing.
They would go out as a group. Jason Giambi, Jeremy Giambi, rest in peace, all those guys,
Yeah.
and they call it the bobsled to hell.
Yeah,
So,
it was. Let me see. It was at this unbelievable bar in Scottsdale called Radius and Axis. I don't know if it's still there. I've never seen anything quite like it. It was old Rome. Let's put it that way.
Old Rome. It's like the Pink Pony. I think it was still there.
Yeah, the Pink Pony was no comparison. Although I think that closed up.
That
was for the old timers. That was where Billy Martin did his drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Drink it all. Steve, but you had mentioned about Pat Jordan. I was wondering if did he throw his arm out? Is that why he didn't have much success when he got
Not really. I think there might have been some injuries, but that was really kind of what confused him, because he really didn't have an injury. He just simply did not succeed. And how can you be so good and totally fall. I mean, my minor league record was probably better than his, you know, and I did not come out of high school or college as a huge prospect like he did.
Huh.
So had he failed to learn, I think the bottom line was he had failed to cultivate his talent. And you see that in an article he wrote in SI called The Mystic Talent of Tom Seaver. And that was one of the great human interest stories that he ever wrote. And in it, he talks about Seaver. And in Seaver's case, Seaver did not throw hard when he was in high school, but he learned how to pitch. He learned control. He learned breaking stuff. He learned to be smart. So when his fastball, his 97, 98 mile an hour fastball came to him later in life, he had all the tools set to immediately achieve success, which he did. And, you know, Jordan wrote about Seaver with pangs of jealousy, friendship and jealousy, because, you know, how come I couldn't? I could throw as hard as Seaver. How come I couldn't succeed like he did? And so he writes like that. And that was he wrote a fantastic piece about Bo Belinsky, who is a character. In fact, that piece literally launched my writing career in 1994. It was what I used as the template for a screenplay I wrote about Bo Belinsky that got me into the writing game. I wrote screenplays for Hollywood for 7 years before I really became what you would call a sports writer or an author of books. So I've done a lot of different things in this genre.
Well, yeah, for some reason it reminds me when I played softball as an adult, just a typical rec league, and our center fielder, I've never seen anybody have that strong an arm. And again, and I know it's softball, not baseball, but from deep center, he would just throw a frozen rope to home plate. And I remember asking, I go, I've never seen anything like this. The guy says, "Oh yeah, well he was a pitcher for coming out of high school for the White Sox." And he, again, throwing like almost 90 miles.
You got to be talking about Dennis Keating.
Actually, that's no.
Wow.
No, Tom. I can't remember his last name now, but I remember Dennis Keating actually because we went to high school together.
Yeah, he played for the White Sox too and had a great arm. He was a former pitcher. That's why I thought.
If I could jump in real quick.
Sure.
So I went to school at UC Santa Barbara, and I was the broadcaster at UC Santa Barbara. I often would talk to scouts. They'd always ask me for, like, who do you see projecting well, stuff like that. Everybody talks, especially at that level. And you ask them about the most talented person they've ever seen, and they'll tell you somebody that never made it to the big leagues. And that's very, very, very common.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that it's just a lot of it's based on opportunity, a lot of it's based on luck, and a lot of it's based on discipline.
Yeah.
When Major League Baseball players, I tell them I played college baseball, and they'd say, "Good luck to you." They wouldn't say like, "Hey, keep on working hard doing that." They'd say, "Good luck to you," because you have to stay healthy. You have to make sure that, the mental aspect of the game fits you well. You have to make sure you're smart enough to get to that level. All these things have to factor in for you to make it to the big leagues. The guy in front of you has to be playing bad for you to get that opportunity to jump up above you. It's all these factors. So a lot of it is hard work, a lot of it's luck, and a lot of it is talent. But I'll tell you what, every single scout I talk to, they say the most talented person I've ever seen never made it to the big leagues. It happens all the time.
I played with a kid named Gary Latore at Redwood High School. And Wade Boggs was once asked, "Who's the best player you ever saw?" And he says, "Gary Latore." And you don't know who Gary Latore is, or maybe Edward does because he's from Marin County, but no one else does. But here was a guy who
that name sounds familiar to me.
Player. Yeah,
that name sounds familiar to me actually, because I went to Redwood.
Well, he played a long time ago. He graduated in '74. He was the MVP of the New York Penn League with the Red Sox. But he liked the ladies, he liked the bars, he liked to gamble, and he liked to fight. And none of that, none of those things are templates for success in baseball. And he dropped out. He didn't make it. So he's unheard of, but his talent was there.
Yeah, it's amazing because when I was bowling semi-professionally, there was a guy who, same sort of thing. This guy was phenomenal, but for whatever reason, he just didn't have his head game on. And so if he throw a bad shot, he would like totally get flustered for the rest of the game. He just couldn't get his head back into it.
Yeah.
And, I mean,
You know, our Redwood High School hangs its star on Buddy Biancalana,
Yeah.
who is a guest on the show. That's where, if we have a claim to fame in the baseball world, it's Buddy Biancalana.
well,
Yeah.
Steve,
And
didn't you play with Buddy?
but he's a good example. He was not necessarily even the best player on our team. He had specialized skills that Major League Scouts were looking for. And those skills were not reflected in statistics, but they were reflected in a projection. And the projection said, this guy can go into the hole, make the backhand play, and throw from deep shortstop to first base. And he can do all, and he can make the throw on the relay. He's got that kind of an arm. There were others. Now that position that Buddy played changed. I would say A-Rod and Cal Ripken changed it. It became a position where you required more power and more offensive player. You got bigger guys played it, but Buddy was still coming up where the shortstop was kind of the smallest guy on the team. You didn't look for offensive power from him, and he did not provide that. But he was a very good defensive player and had success in the big leagues doing that. But I can tell you 5 or 6 other players just on our high school team, which was a tremendous team, who, you know, at the high school level were just as ballyhooed, so to speak.
Well, pretty amazing. Okay, guys, we're going to cut to our second commercial break. Trivia question here. Again, we're talking pitchers from the year 2000 to 2009. Which major league pitcher had the most strikeouts, 2,182, from the year 2000 to 2009? Okay. And do you want a little hint?
Sure.
He's left-handed. So you have
Okay.
you get rid of, well, I guess not half. You get rid of most of the other players. All right. Which major league pitcher, a southpaw, had the most strikeouts, 2,182, from the year 2000 to 2009? That's our trivia question. When we come back, we'll entertain our guest, Steve Travers, former pitcher and an author, and also Hollywood writer. I love that part of it. All right, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. One more time, Edward Brown here along with FP Santangelo Jr., Russell Jackman, and our special guest, Steve Travers. Trivia question number 2. What major league pitcher, a southpaw, had the most strikeouts, 2,182, from 2000 to 2009?
Got to be Randy Johnson.
Got to be Randy Johnson. That is correct. All right. So, Steve, go ahead. Give us a recap of the book that you just wrote, and then you were talking about your top 5 stories.
Yeah. Well, the first part are roughly 40 to 50 articles that were written. They go back as far as the early part of the century all the way to the present day. Most of the best stuff I found was in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And then my 50 favorite books that were ever written. There are crossovers by some of the writers wrote books as well as articles. For instance, John Underwood, Pat Jordan, or some of the people actually had things written about them or by them. One example would be the great Bill Spaceman Lee from Terralinda High School. I chose a article written by Tom Bonk of the Los Angeles Times about Bill Lee in 1987. And I chose that over an SI piece on Bill that's maybe a little more famous, because the Bonk article is really how I became friends with Bill. And that's a different story, but it launched me into calling him and having contact with him and developing what is now a 30-year friendship. But Bill also wrote a book, which I consider one of the great baseball books ever. It was called The Wrong Stuff. It came out in 1984, right after he was more or less blackballed from baseball. And it tells all these fantastic stories about inside baseball. It's better than Ball 4. It's one of the best baseball books that
Oh,
I've ever read.
Tell the audience
ever read.
why was Bill blackballed?
Because he was an oddball and he told the truth about the way baseball is, about the way managers are, about the structure of how players are paid, how players are discarded when they no longer can produce or whatever. And he did not help himself by claiming that he sprinkled marijuana on his pancakes.
Oh, yeah.
And then finally leaving a Montreal Expos game before the game, going to a bar, drinking 4 drinks, and then returning in the 7th inning, telling the manager, "I think you might need me at this point." So that was the final straw for Bill, who still had some talent, and he was released. And he's probably played more baseball games since then as a amateur playing in semi-pro leagues. But he's just, as you well know, he's one of the all-time great characters.
Oh, yeah.
And spaceman lefties of all time.
Well, in fact, I think didn't he just set the record a few years ago for pitching being the oldest?
He did. He set the record at Albert Park in San Rafael, and he just broke the record because he just signed with the Savannah Bananas, independent team in Savannah, Georgia. That's where he's playing right now. He's 70. He's about 76 or 77 years old, still actually playing. I'm actually going to go and see Bill sometime this summer or fall because my daughter has a bed and breakfast in Vermont, and as fate would have it, she's Bill's neighbor. So that gives me an excuse to go out there and take in a couple of Red Sox games, and we'll go to the Hall of Fame. We're going to go to Montreal, things like that.
That's awesome. The Savannah Bananas, phenomenal. The Globetrotters of baseball right now, led by manager Eric Burns.
Oh,
that's right.
2001.
Yeah, another 2001 Oakland A and a character in his own right.
Absolutely love Burns. Yeah, I call him Uncle Burns.
Yeah, I wish I knew him better. I think I met him once or twice, but yeah, he seems like he's a great UCLA Bruin too.
Yep.
That's great. Yeah, I was gonna say some of the stories from like the 50s, 60s, and then even the earlier ones. I'm thinking of Jack Dempsey and that sort of thing, and Ted Williams hitting 400 and DiMaggio breaking the streak. I mean, those are kind of like the major stories, but there's got to be some other fun ones, like you mentioned about Pat Jordan. Any other quick ones that you want to mention?
Well, one that I liked was called "Going Fishing with the Kid," Ted Williams and the Florida Keys. This is a 1967 Sports Illustrated article by John Underwood, who later helped him write his autobiography. And it talks about Williams' baseball career, but what it really gets into is Williams fishing. And he was as great a fisherman as he was a hitter. And has a great line in there. It's probably very politically incorrect, but I'll say it anyway. Anything that Williams considered subpar, for instance, a poorly tied tie, that is a tie at the end of a fishing line is what I'm getting at. Anything done in the course of fishing that is just not up to his standards, he would call Chinese. That's Chinese, he would say, because he had fought against Red China during the Korean War. So that was his, and it's hot as heck and everybody else is getting tired, but Williams would just go on all day, and he would wear this particular kind of sunscreen that they only give to fighter pilots because they're in the cockpit of these planes that are at such high, or it's actually given to them in case they get they have to bail out. They're stranded in the Pacific Ocean for like 2 weeks in the hot sun. They have this special kind of, so he would wear that, to keep from getting skin cancer. And that was a great article. And another great article, believe it or not, was written by Lou Alcindor when he graduated from UCLA, and he did a 2-part series on his experiences at UCLA. And it was very illuminating why he became a Muslim, his experience with John Wooden. And it was one of the first pieces by an athlete that was really honest and raw about what it's like to be an athlete. And I included that in there, and I thought Alcindor was a very smart guy, and he was a good writer. I think he wrote it himself. I don't think anyone ghost wrote it for him. And there's so many others.
Well, and a little trivia here. What was his given first name?
Well, you know, I think this show on the Lakers, I think they screwed it up. I believe it was Ferdinand Louis Alcindor III, but the show had it Ferdinand Louis Alcindor Jr.
Okay,
But I don't believe so. I believe he was a
the answer
third.
to Ferdinand is the one that we're looking for, because it's funny. We always talk about what was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's given name, and everybody always says Lou Alcindor. It's like, no, it's Ferdinand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was Ferdinand.
Ferdinand, right?
His
Yeah.
parents he's of Jamaican descent. His father was a Roman Catholic metro police officer in New York City. So he was raised, he was raised in a two-parent family. He was an only child, New York City, and obviously went to UCLA. And great. I think he's the greatest basketball player ever lived, in my opinion.
I mean, yeah. What did they win? Like 11 championships in a row or something ridiculous like that?
UCLA,
Yeah.
I think 10 of 11 between
11,
64 and
redonkulous.
75. Greatest dominance ever, really.
Yeah, crazy. So Steve, go ahead and give out your information one more time about how people can purchase your book or Kindle.
Yeah, it's on. Go to the Kindle section of Amazon and type in Stephen Travers best sports writing ever, and it'll pop up. The foreword was written by Bill Spaceman Lee, by the way. That's worth reading in and of itself. I think he starts off by saying, to be or not, Steve Travers is my disciple, whether he likes it to be or not to be. So he riffs on Shakespeare. Then he says, I'm his favorite. He says of me, I'm his favorite conservative. And then he says, Bill Lee is my favorite liberal. So we get along, even though our politics are completely opposite, but it's a perfect example of how people with different views can get along. We can do it. It can be done.
Yeah, it's funny because one of our previous co-hosts was Bruce McGowan, and Bruce is definitely left of center, and I'm definitely right of center, but yet we would get along.
Exactly. I saw Bruce just about 10 days ago. He's got some health issues, which I guess you know about.
Yeah.
But a great guy. Love Bruce.
So, Steve, while you're on the phone here, I want to ask you what's your take on all this transgender stuff? Because I was telling the guys before you came on, it's like I'm waiting for the first transgender man to play women's basketball.
Well, I mean, the next Supreme Court Justice of the United States apparently does not know the difference between a man and a woman.
Yeah. I kind of wish that they would have asked her a little bit more. Like, well, how do you identify yourself? Are you a man or are you a woman, or is there something in between?
Well, I guess my answer to that, if asked, I quote the great Humphrey Bogart, and I'll say, I'm a citizen of the world. I'm a drunkard, and a citizen that makes me a citizen of the world. How's that?
Because it's funny. I was wondering, like, where are all the feminists? I don't seem to hear them kind of coming out against this.
Well,
because if anything, if I were, a sexist, male chauvinist pig, the old term, I guess, I would say yay to all this transgender stuff, because it shows the superiority of a man, even if he changes into a woman. But for some reason, nobody seems to catch on to that.
Well, I mean, the hypocrisy of the left is so obvious, and you're basically making your point. I don't even,
I'd be more concerned about what Clarence Thomas
needs
is
to be
doing.
said. I mean, we're a group of people of common sense.
Yeah. Well, Russ, go ahead. What were you saying? Russ?
Yeah, I'd be more concerned about what Clarence Thomas is doing, considering he's an actual Supreme Court justice right now, and he has a lot of questions about what he's been, thinking about, thanks to his wife and everything going on with January 6th. So, you could worry more about the transgender stuff, which is not a problem, or we could worry about Clarence Thomas, who is currently a big problem right now.
Well,
So
apparently it's his wife that did all that stuff, and January 6th seems to be nothing compared to a lot of other stuff out there.
I worry more about it than I worry
zero
about
concern
transgender
with
athletes.
January 6th.
Yeah.
I have absolutely no concern whatsoever with the effect.
Well, I do, and I care about it more than I care about transgender athletes.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Just talk about sports, guys. It's Sports Econ 101. I don't know anything.
there you go. Thank you, FP, for getting us back on track.
Yeah,
All right.
no worries.
Hey, we got a third trivia question here. This knuckleball hurler had the dubious distinction of hitting the most major league batters, 107, between 2000 and 2009. Can you identify him? Email edward@sportsecon101.com the answer to this question. This knuckleball hurler had the dubious distinction of hitting the most major league batters, 107, between 2000 and 2009. Can you name him? All right, stay with us. Sports Econ 101. We'll be back with some closing comments. Don't touch that dial. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Last time for today, I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with FP Santangelo Jr., Russell Jackman, and our special guest, Steve Travers. Okay, guys, third trivia question. This knuckleball hurler had the dubious distinction of hitting the most major league batters, 107, between 2000 and 2009. Who was this pitcher? Anyone?
I think he pitched for the Boston Red Sox.
Tim Wakefield.
Tim Wakefield. That's correct. You get a little
Wow.
boost up there. Not bad, guys. Let's see here. Las Vegas wants an NBA team. You think they're going to get it?
Why not? They're getting everything else.
Yeah. Excuse me. Get the Raiders. And yeah. I mean, they even have hockey in the desert. So
I think if they give Las Vegas a team before they give Seattle a team, I think that would be very unfair. Seattle should have never lost their team, and they've been waiting patiently for now almost 2 decades, and they deserve a team more than Las Vegas does.
Well, it all comes down to money, doesn't it?
What, Seattle doesn't have money?
I mean, I don't know. Yeah,
I
it's
just-
funny because you think, okay, we'll get all the Amazon people and all that. But okay, guys, you ready? We're going to cut out. Here's our thoughts for the day. So I went to a bookstore and asked the saleswoman, "Where's the self-help section?" She said, "If I told you, it would defeat the purpose."
Nice.
And why can't you trust large trees? Because they're usually the shadiest ones. All right.
Good one.
Next week, the Sports Econ 101, we'll be discussing sports topics from a business perspective and asking more sports trivia questions. Thanks for listening. On behalf of our team, I'm your host, Edward Brown. We'll see you next week. So long.